Childlessness can be deeply heartbreaking. Even when adoption is considered, the longing for a biological child may never fully fade. But was it the same for Mr. Jonathan and Mrs. Grace? Let's find out. Many years ago, in the lively town of Ajagunle, lived a beautiful couple named Mrs. Grace and Mr. Jonathan. They had been married for years, their love a quiet beacon of hope in a community where life was often harsh and unpredictable. Yet, despite their deep affection for one another, their home remained empty of the laughter and pitter-patter of little feet. The years passed, and the whispers began, soft at first, then louder, more insistent. "When will they have a child?" the neighbors would ask, their voices dripping with pity and judgment. "Perhaps they are cursed," others would murmur, their eyes narrowing with suspicion. The weight of their childlessness pressed heavily on Grace and Jonathan. They prayed, they sought medical help, they even consulted traditional healers, but nothing changed. The mocking grew unbearable, and the couple began to withdraw, their once vibrant home now shrouded in silence and sorrow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the bustling streets of Ajagunle, Grace turned to her husband, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "Jonathan, my love," she said softly, "we cannot keep living like this. We have so much love to give. Why not give adoption a chance? Many people are saying we are cursed. Let's try, please." Jonathan hesitated, his heart torn between the fear of judgment and the longing to fill the void in their lives. But when he looked into his wife's eyes, he saw a glimmer of hope, a hope he hadn't felt in years. "All right, my wife," he said finally, his voice steady. "Let's do it if that will make you happy." And so, they did. It wasn't long before their home was filled with the sound of laughter and joy. The child they adopted was a little girl named Emily. She was just a toddler when she came to live with them, her wide, curious eyes taking in the world with a sense of wonder that melted Grace and Jonathan's hearts. Emily was a striking child, her beauty undeniable. Her hair was thick and lustrous, cascading in soft waves that framed her cherubic face. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated everyone around her, it was her spirit. Emily was always happy, her laughter infectious, her presence a balm to the weary souls of those who knew her. From the moment she stepped into their lives, Emily brought warmth and light that Grace and Jonathan had long yearned for. She was their miracle, their answered prayer, and they loved her with every fiber of their being. But something happened. Years later, as Emily drifted into restless sleep one night, the voices of her parents drifted through the thin walls of their modest home, sharp and urgent. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, as she strained to listen. "We can't keep this from her any longer, Jonathan," Grace's voice hissed, low and trembling. "She deserves to know the truth." "And what good will it do, Grace?" her father shot back, his voice strained with frustration. "You think telling her will make things better? It will only break her heart." "She's not a child anymore," Grace insisted. "She's strong. She can handle it. But if we wait any longer, the community will force our hand. You know how they are. They'll make it worse." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her parents rarely argued, and never like this. She crept closer to the door, her bare feet silent on the cool concrete floor. "And what if she leaves us?" Jonathan's voice cracked, raw with emotion. "What if she decides we're not her family anymore? I can't lose her, Grace. I can't." There was a long pause, and then Grace's voice, softer now, filled with a sadness that made Emily's chest ache. "We don't have a choice, Jonathan. The elders have already spoken. They've chosen David Okafor. If we don't tell her, they will." Emily's stomach twisted. David Okafor? The name meant nothing to her, but the way her mother said it, like it was a death sentence, sent a chill down her spine. She pressed her ear closer to the door, her heart racing. "She'll hate us," Jonathan whispered, his voice breaking. "She'll hate us for keeping this from her, for letting them dictate her life." "She might," Grace admitted. "But we have to trust her. We have to believe she's strong enough to handle the truth. If we don't tell her now, we'll lose her forever." Emily couldn't take it anymore. She pushed the door open, her hands trembling as she stepped into the dimly lit room. Her parents froze, their faces pale with shock. "Tell me what?" Emily demanded, her voice shaking. "What are you hiding from me?" Her parents exchanged a glance, their silence deafening. Finally, Grace stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. Emily, there's something we need to tell you. Something we should have told you a long time ago. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. What is it, Mum? Jonathan let out a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his words. You were adopted, Emily. You've always been our daughter, but you weren't born to us. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She felt the ground shift beneath her, the world she had known crumbling into pieces. Adopted, she repeated, her voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me before? Grace reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it over Emily's. We didn't want you to feel different, my dear. We wanted you to feel like you belonged with us. And you do. You always have. But now, the community has spoken. Emily's stomach churned. What do you mean, the community has spoken? Jonathan sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his words. They believe you owe them something for taking you in. They've said that, because you were adopted, you must marry someone from this community. It's the only way to repay them, Emily. The room spun. Emily's breath came in short, shallow gasps. Marry? Who am I supposed to marry? His name is David Okafor, Grace said softly. The son of a mechanic in age. He's a good man, Emily, but he doesn't have much. In fact, he's poor. They say it will be good for you, for us, for the whole community. What matters in marriage is peace, not material things, Grace added, her voice thick with emotion. Emily's mind raced, her thoughts a jumble of fear and disbelief. She had always dreamed of a different life, a life where she could go to school, where she could make something of herself. But now, those dreams seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. You're asking me to marry someone I don't even know, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and despair. I'm only 15. I'm still trying to figure out who I am, still trying to understand my own life. And now, marriage? How can this be my reality? This isn't fair. This life is cruel. I know, my darling, Jonathan said, his voice heavy with sorrow. But we have no choice. The pressure is too much. You don't know what it's like to live in this community, where everyone's watching, everyone's waiting to see what happens next. Emily felt the walls closing in, the weight of their expectations pressing down on her chest. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape. But where would she go? She was tied to this place, to these people, to a fate she had never chosen. The days that followed were a blur. Emily moved through life like a ghost, her mind consumed by the storm raging inside her. Everywhere she went, she felt the eyes of the community on her, judging, whispering, waiting. Her first meeting with David Okafor was brief and awkward. He arrived with his father, a stern man who spoke with authority, but David himself was quiet, almost shy. He sat across from her, his hands fidgeting in his lap, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Emily, he began, his voice soft and hesitant, I know this isn't what either of us wanted. But my family needs this. The community needs this. I'm not here to force you into anything, but they expect us to marry. Emily stared at him, her heart aching with a mix of pity and frustration. This man, this stranger, was as trapped as she was. I don't know you, David, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can do this. I'm not ready to marry someone I don't even know. After all, I'm still young. I have no say in this, do I? David lowered his gaze, his shoulders slumping. I wish things were different, Emily. I really do. But I don't have a choice, and neither do you. This is what the community wants. They're not giving us an option. His words echoed in her mind long after he left. She felt the tears well up in her eyes, but she forced them back. This wasn't just about her. It was about her parents, about David, about the community that had raised her. But deep down, she knew she couldn't live this life. She couldn't marry a man she didn't love, couldn't sacrifice her dreams for the sake of tradition. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily made her decision. She couldn't marry David. She couldn't live a life dictated by others. But she also couldn't abandon her parents, couldn't turn her back on the community that had raised her. She sat down with David, her heart pounding in her chest. "I can't marry you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Not like this. Not because someone else told us to." David looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I understand," he said softly. "But don't think this will be easy. The community will turn its back on us. We'll both suffer." "I know," Emily replied, her voice firm. "But I'm willing to fight. I'll do whatever it takes to be free." And fight she did. Emily and David's relationship became a quiet rebellion against the expectations that bound them. They found solace in each other's company, but it wasn't enough to shield them from the harsh realities of life in Ajagunle. The community's whispers grew louder, the judgment harsher. But Emily held her head high, her resolve unshaken. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, overwhelmed by the fear of being ostracized, of being alone. But then she would remember the way David had looked at her when they first met, the way they had supported each other. She wasn't alone. They weren't alone. And slowly, Emily began to see the change in herself. She stopped caring about what the community thought of her. She began to care about what she thought of herself. And that made all the difference. Years passed, and though the judgment never fully stopped, Emily and David built a life together. It was a modest life, filled with hard work and quiet joys. They had their struggles, but they had each other. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Emily had found her freedom, not in escaping the community, but in living her life on her own terms. And in doing so, she had found happiness. Her journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And that was enough. After Emily left them because of the marriage they forced on her, simply because she was adopted, Mrs. Grace and Mr. Jonathan were never the same again. Their once lively home became a place of silence and shadows. Without Emily's laughter, without her footsteps echoing through the halls, the house felt unbearably hollow. They had no other children, never did. And now, the one they had raised with love, the one they had called their own, was gone. Grief clung to them like a second skin. At first, they tried to carry on with life as usual, telling themselves that Emily would come back. That she would understand one day. That she would forgive them. But the days turned to months, and the months to years, and the silence from Emily remained. Jonathan's business slowly collapsed, his once sharp mind dulled by regret and sorrow. Grace fell ill often, her spirit dimming with each passing season. They sold their furniture piece by piece, their savings drained by time and misfortune. The house began to crumble around them, its walls peeling like the edges of a once cherished photograph. Poverty set in, not just of money, but of hope. People in the community who once envied them now spoke in hushed tones, shaking their heads in pity. "That's what happens," they'd whisper, "when love is traded for pride. When a child is treated like a debt to be repaid." And yet, even in their suffering, Mr. Jonathan and Mrs. Grace never stopped setting the table for three. They never stopped hoping. Each sunset brought the same wish that Emily, wherever she was, would find her way back to them. But they didn't know. Emily had not only found peace, she had found purpose. And soon, fate would bring their worlds together again, in the most unexpected way. It was a warm afternoon when Emily returned to Ajagunle. She hadn't planned it, not really. She was passing through on business, working with a local charity that supported education for girls in underprivileged communities. Life had changed for her. She was no longer the timid teenager forced into choices she didn't make. Now, she was a woman with her own voice, her own path, and a heart still tender from the past. Ajagunle looked both familiar and foreign. The narrow streets still hummed with life, children chasing tires, women selling peppers and groundnuts in woven baskets, and the same tin roofs glinting under the sun. Yet the air carried the weight of memories, the kind that clung to your skin like dust. Emily hadn't meant to stop by the old house. But her feet betrayed her heart, and before she knew it, she was standing in front of it, aged, worn, almost forgotten. The gate hung loosely on its hinges, and weeds had swallowed the garden where she once played. Her breath caught in her throat. Could they still be here? A part of her hoped they weren't. Another part prayed they were. She stepped through the gate. Inside, the air was thick with silence and the faint scent of kerosene. And then she heard it, a cough, hoarse and low, followed by the slow drag of slippers on concrete. Mrs. Grace appeared in the hallway, thinner than Emily remembered, her once radiant face lined with time and sorrow. She stopped mid-step when she saw her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Grace's lips parted, trembling. "Emily." Emily swallowed hard. Her voice was soft, almost unsure. "Mama." Tears welled instantly in Grace's eyes as she reached out, stumbling toward her like someone waking from a long, painful dream. They met in a tight embrace, silent, shaking, soaked in years of ache. From the corner of the corridor, Mr. Jonathan emerged slowly, leaning on a cane, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "Is this real?" he whispered. Emily turned to him, her voice steadier now. "Papa, I'm home." He let the cane drop and reached out with both arms, drawing her in with a quiet sob. For the first time in many years, the house was filled with something that had long been missing, not just warmth, but healing. They didn't speak of the past that day. They simply sat together, holding hands, sharing the silence. Because sometimes, forgiveness doesn't begin with words. It begins with presence. In the days that followed Emily's return, the house began to breathe again. It started in small ways. Mrs. Grace began sweeping the front steps again, humming old songs under her breath. Mr. Jonathan polished his dusty old radio and set it near the window like he used to, tuning into the evening news, even though the sound was barely audible. And Emily moved through the home like a gentle breeze, softening years of bitterness that had hardened in corners. They didn't talk about the past right away. Not about the adoption. Not about the marriage. Not about the silence that stretched between them like a fault line. Instead, they talked about the garden. "Your hibiscus tree didn't make it," Grace said one morning, her fingers brushing the cracked flower pot by the porch. "We can plant another," Emily replied, crouching beside her. And so they did. Together, they cleared the weeds, turned the dry soil, and planted fresh seeds. It wasn't just a garden, it was a quiet act of restoration. A way of saying, "We're trying." But healing isn't linear. One evening, as they shared boiled yam and palm oil, Jonathan looked up from his plate and said, "I thought we lost you forever." Emily didn't answer at first. She stirred her food, her heart tightening. Then, softly, "You did. But I found myself. And that helped me find my way back to you." There were tears in Jonathan's eyes, but he blinked them away. "I wanted to do what was right. I thought giving you to the community was a form of honor, not a burden." "I know," she whispered. "I know now." That night, Emily sat alone under the old mango tree, the moon casting silver light on the worn earth. She thought of David, her husband, her friend, of the life they'd built, of how strange it was that something forced on her had led her to freedom. He had stood by her through it all, never once resenting her past. The next day, she told her parents everything about the early struggle, the slow love, the simple joys of her new life. Grace and Jonathan listened, their hands clasped tightly together. "We're proud of you," Grace said, voice thick with emotion. "Even if we didn't show it the right way. And we're sorry," Jonathan added. "For everything." Emily smiled through her tears. "I forgave you a long time ago. I just needed to find myself first." As the days turned to weeks, Emily visited often, each time leaving behind more laughter, more light. Slowly, she helped restore the home, repairing the roof, repainting the walls, even getting Jonathan's old business documents in order, just in case he wanted to dream again. And in that quiet old house in Ajagunle, something beautiful bloomed once more, not just the flowers in the garden, but love reborn. A love that had survived shame, silence, and separation. A love that had, against all odds, come home. Word of Emily's return spread through Ajagunle like harmattan wind, fast, dry, and stirring old dust. At first, the whispers came, "She came back. After all these years. Didn't she marry that poor mechanic's son?" But soon, the curiosity shifted. Because Emily was no longer the uncertain girl people once pitied or judged. She had returned with quiet strength, dignity in her step, and kindness in her eyes. The community watched as she moved through the streets, not with arrogance, but with purpose. She greeted everyone, helped elderly women carry water, stopped to buy roasted corn from roadside sellers. There was no bitterness in her, no pride. Just grace. One Saturday, she visited the local school she once dreamed of attending. The paint was peeling, desks broken, and some of the girls sat on the floor. Emily stood there, heart aching, but also burning with resolve. She made a few calls. Within weeks, things began to change. New books arrived. Volunteers came. Uniforms were donated. And slowly, the little school began to rise from neglect into something beautiful because of Emily's hands, her voice, her heart. Young girls in the community began to see her differently. To them, she wasn't just that adopted girl who left, she was a woman who had walked through fire and returned with light. One girl, barely 12, stopped her after a workshop and asked, "Auntie Emily, can I really become something, like you?" Emily smiled, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You already are something, my dear. You just need to believe it before anyone else does." Mrs. Grace and Mr. Jonathan watched all this unfold with humbled hearts. Their daughter, once silenced by tradition, had become a voice for the voiceless. The same community that once pressured them into giving her away now gathered at their gate to praise her, to thank them. "We judged too quickly," the elders confessed one day, seated beneath the village tree. "But now we see, that girl was a gift." Jonathan, now older and slower, simply nodded. "We almost lost her. But grace brought her back." As time passed, Emily began mentoring girls, starting small businesses for women, and organizing medical outreaches with David, who had become a respected mechanic and community leader in his own right. Their marriage, once arranged under pressure, had matured into a quiet partnership grounded in love and purpose. They built a home nearby, not far from her parents, so they could look after them, so that time could heal what tradition had once torn apart. And as the sun set each evening over Ajagunle, people would often see a familiar scene: Emily, seated on the front porch with her mother beside her, Jonathan dozing in his chair, and David laughing with the neighbors' children.